The man handed me the envelope without meeting my eyes. It was a crisp, legal-size thing, the kind of sterile package that usually contains tax forms or insurance updates. He mumbled, "You've been served," then turned and walked back to his sedan, its engine still purring at the curb. I stood on my front step, the morning chill seeping through my thin housecoat, the dew on the lawn glittering under a pale, indifferent sun. My name was printed on the front in a severe, blocky typeface, not the flowing script of a birthday card, not the hasty scrawl of a note left on the fridge. This was official. I lowered myself onto the top step, the cold concrete biting through my slippers. The weight in my chest was a physical thing, a lodestone of dread. My garden shears lay where I'd abandoned them the evening before, next to a half-weeded flower bed. The familiar, comforting aroma of my morning coffee wafted from the kitchen, now smelling like betrayal. In the oak tree, a family of sparrows chattered, the same birds I'd pointed out to my grandchildren, teaching them the names: chipping sparrow, housefinch. Their world was unchanged. Mine had just been hollowed out. 71 years. That's how long I'd been breathing, trying, doing. A wife for 32 of them, until cancer stole Arthur. A mother for 45, ever since the first quickening in my womb, a sensation I'd mistaken for indigestion. It wasn't. It was David. My David. And now, according to the papers in my hand, my only child was suing me. The words swam before my eyes. Petition for civil protection order. Unwanted surveillance and persistent intrusion, psychological distress. It was his lawyer's name at the top, but attached was a personal statement. I knew that handwriting. I'd praised its loops and curls when he was 7. Now it was used to detail my offenses. It hadn't always been this way. Of course it hadn't. I thought I was building a bridge when I moved. After their second child was born, when the fatigue in my daughter-in-law, Clara's, voice was a constant, thin wire, I'd sold my beloved, echoing house in Maple Creek. I used the proceeds to buy a small, tidy bungalow just 3 streets over from theirs. It was a cozy place with a postage stamp lawn and a sunroom perfect for my ferns. I can be a support system, I told them, my voice bright with hope. I can take the kids to the park, help with school runs, bring over a hot meal. And I had. I'd baked their favorite sourdough, left it in a basket on their porch. I'd weeded their vegetable patch while they were at work. I tried so hard to be a gentle presence, a soft landing. I truly had. But a subtle current had shifted in their home over the years. Or perhaps I had slowly transformed in their eyes, morphing from a refuge into a reminder, from a comfort into a complication. Clara began using a specific word, parameters. At first, it was floated gently, a trial balloon. "We're just trying to set some clear parameters, Helen." Later, it was stated firmly, a line drawn in the sand. I'd hear her say it to the children, "We have to respect our family's parameters." David never countered her, not a single time. There were other signs, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to this moment. Invitations that stopped coming, conversations that felt like quarterly reports, a birthday where my gift was acknowledged with a thumbs-up emoji in a group chat. Once, Clara had asked if I could maybe shoot a text before popping over. I'd nodded, smiled, said, "Absolutely, dear." I'd gone home, locked my bathroom door, and cried so hard I was sick. But this was different. This wasn't a cold shoulder or a silent treatment. This was a document. This was the law. This had a case number. I spent the rest of that morning paralyzed at my small maple kitchen table, the envelope lying between us like a dead thing. I made myself read the complaint again, slowly, dissecting each accusation. Repeated, uninvited appearances at the plaintiff's residence. A pattern of behavior constituting emotional overbearance. Disregard for expressed family boundaries. Me? Emotional overbearance? There was an itemized list. dates I arrived without prior notice, instances where my stay was deemed excessive, a note about a time I had offered unsolicited advice on child nutrition, another about the day I remarked that the baby's socks seemed too thin for the weather. None of it was malicious, none of it was screamed or thrown. It was all just noticed, cataloged, weaponized. Then the eyes caught the sentence that stole the air from my lungs. The plaintiffs seek a judicial restraining order and restitution for financial contributions made by the defendant which have created an untenable dynamic of obligation. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted to be paid for the inconvenience of my love. I didn't call anyone that day. Not my brother in Phoenix, not my friend Margot, who still brings me fresh basil from her greenhouse, not even my granddaughter Lily, whose small, sticky hands had once spent an entire afternoon decorating my arms with glittery stickers. I just sat. I drank cold coffee. I watched a blue jay bully the smaller birds away from the feeder, a feathered tyrant in its own world. Around 4 o'clock, a strange, numb resolve settled on me. I went to the hall closet and pulled out an old, expanding file folder from the top shelf. Inside was a quiet history of my heart, written in check stubs and bank transfers, the deposit for their first home, the surprise vacation to Colorado I'd funded for their 10th anniversary, the tuition for that exclusive Montessori preschool. None of it had been a loan. It had been a privilege. It had been joy. But somewhere along the way, the currency of my affection had been devalued, its meaning twisted into debt. That night, sleep was a foreign country. I lay in the dark, the ceiling a blank screen onto which I projected every interaction, every word I'd ever spoken, searching for the moment I'd become a monster. I didn't find it. I was a measured woman, a woman who had learned the hard way to be self-sufficient. But in their new world of curated lives and emotional minimalism, even a mother's love had a quota, and I had apparently exceeded mine. It all started, I suppose, with a doormat. The first time I visited their new house, a sleek, modern thing, all sharp angles and gray tones, Clara had just unrolled it, a black rectangle with stark white lettering. "Please shoes off. Sanctuary starts here." I chuckled, thinking it was one of those witty, modern things. It wasn't. She had pointed to it, her smile tight, as I stepped across the threshold. "We're really trying to keep the dust down," she said. Her tone was not unkind, but it held no warmth. I remember thinking, she's just stretched thin. 2 little ones, a demanding job, a husband who travels. She needs an ally, not a critic. So, I allied. I organized their cluttered garage. I stocked their freezer with homemade soups. I picked up their prescriptions. One afternoon, I noticed their spice cabinet was a chaotic jumble of bottles, many expired. I spent a happy hour alphabetizing them, buying new glass jars. The following week, I saw it had all been returned to its previous state of happy chaos. Clara never mentioned it. After that, I promised myself I would only help when asked. But the asking became rarer than a blue moon. David, my boy who used to call me just to tell me a funny joke he'd heard, now communicated in terse, punctuationless texts. "Swamped. Talk later." Later rarely came. His voice, when I did hear it, was distant, polite, as if he were speaking to a telemarketer. I blamed the economy. I blamed the pressures of modern fatherhood. I blamed myself for some unnamed inherent flaw I couldn't quite pinpoint. But even in the growing chill, there were pockets of sunshine. Lily would sprint across the lawn when she saw my car, launching herself into my arms. Leo, the baby, would fall asleep on my shoulder, his breath a warm, steady rhythm against my neck. Those moments were my anchors, the treasures I stored away for the lean times. When I sold my old house, I never disclosed the final sum. It felt private. I used a portion to buy the bungalow. Clara had said, "Oh, that's wonderful, Helen." She'd sounded like she was reading from a script. I'd ignored the pang. I wanted to be near, to be on hand. But over time, being on hand became being underfoot, and then being an issue. The first official talk happened about 8 months after I moved. Clara came over alone. She brought a tablet, not a notepad. "I just want to make sure we're all on the same page," she began, her posture perfectly erect. "We're so grateful for your help, but sometimes the volume of it can feel a bit smothering." The volume. I was a volume. "We love that you love the kids, but sometimes the unexpected visits can disrupt our schedule." I nodded, my throat tight. "And the food, while delicious, sometimes doesn't align with our current meal planning app. We're doing a gluten-free cleanse." I nodded again. "And some of your observations about nap times or screen limits, they can feel a little critical." That one cut deep. I had never criticized. I had shared wisdom, born of experience, offered with love. But to her, my experience was an editorial. Of course, I managed. I would never want to overstep. Clara had smiled, a neat, closed-lipped affair, and stood to leave. After that, I bade myself scarce. I texted before even thinking of visiting. Sometimes I didn't visit at all. There were stretches of time where I only saw my grandchildren through the window, tiny figures being bundled into the car or playing on their swing set. I'd wave. They often didn't see me. Once, Lily left a painting on my porch, a vibrant, messy sun with a lopsided smile. Beneath it, she'd scrawled, "I love you, Nana." I'd tacked it to my refrigerator, where it faded and curled at the edges, a relic of a warmer season. Then came the emails. David started them, short, efficient bursts. "Mom, please don't bring groceries unless we've discussed it. Please avoid commenting on our parenting decisions in front of the children. Clara finds the frequent visits disruptive." Not we, Clara. Still, I complied. What was the alternative? To demand my place? To beg for crumbs of their time? Then, last winter, I found a beautiful, puffy coat for Lily on clearance, a deep burgundy color with silver toggles. She adored it. She spun in circles, calling it her princess cloak. The next day, it was gone. Clara had taken it to a donation bin. "It just wasn't really our aesthetic," she explained. No thank you, no recognition of the joy it had brought for a single afternoon. Lily noticed. She asked me, her small face puzzled, "Nana, did you take my red coat back?" "I think maybe Mommy thought it was too big, sweetie," I lied, my heart cracking. Her brow had furrowed. "But I loved it." That winter, I wasn't invited for Christmas Eve. "We're keeping it super small this year, just the 4 of us," David had texted. "We need some introvert time." I'd made myself a single serving of lasagna. I'd eaten it at the table with one placemat, one set of silverware. On New Year's Day, they stopped by for 20 minutes. The kids got presents. I received a scented candle and a card signed, "With affection, David and Clara." Not love, affection. And now, a lawsuit for disturbing their peace. That night, I pulled the file folder out again. I spread the contents on the living room floor, the bank statements, the cashed checks, the credit card bill where I'd paid for their new water heater. All of it given freely, with an open heart. I never expected a return. I only wanted their lives to be a little easier, a little brighter. Now they wanted me legally silenced and financially reimbursed. I ran a finger over the raised print of my name on the court summons. The woman they once called Mom, Nana, their safe harbor, was now officially a defendant. Perhaps I had been naive. Perhaps I had loved too loudly for their quiet world. But I had seen clearly now. And a woman who has seen clearly is a dangerous thing. The silence was over. The silence in my bungalow had a new quality to it over the next 3 days. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of solitude I'd grown accustomed to. It was a thick, heavy absence, as if the very air had been charged with the verdict of that envelope. I moved through the rooms like a curator in a museum of my own life, touching objects lightly. The ceramic vase David made in 3rd grade, the wedding photo of Arthur and me, young and impossibly bright-eyed. They felt like artifacts from a civilization that had been wiped out by a sudden, unrecorded cataclysm. I kept the blinds drawn. The world outside, the mailman's cheerful whistle, the distant laughter of children, felt like a personal taunt. My phone stayed off, its black screen a silent judge. I existed on tea I would brew and forget to drink, reheating the same mug until the liquid evaporated into a bitter, tannic sludge. On the 4th morning, a sliver of defiant sunlight pierced through a gap in the blinds, landing directly on the envelope where it lay on the kitchen table. It seemed to dare me. I opened it again. The words were the same, of course. Petition for civil protection order. Persistent intrusion. Emotional overbearance. But this time, my grief had hardened into a sharp, focused clarity. I was no longer just reading the lines, I was reading between them. What was the unspoken text? What was the real grievance buried beneath the legalese? Phrases like emotional strain and pattern of boundary crossing stood out, but there was no mention of the sleepless nights I'd spent in their rocking chair with a colicky Leo. No reference to the countless hours I'd spent helping Lily with her reading, patiently sounding out words until they clicked. No acknowledgement of the months I'd taken over their grocery shopping entirely when Clara was dealing with a severe bout of postpartum anxiety. A cold fire ignited in my belly. I found a legal pad and a pen. I would not make a list for a lawyer, not yet. This was for me, a ledger of my own, not of debts owed, but of love given. It began with an entry from 5 years ago, March 2018. Down payment supplement for their house on Elmcrest, $52,000. I remembered the phone call, David's voice giddy with excitement and stress. "It's perfect, Mom. The schools are incredible, but we're stretched. Claire's parents helped with the inspection, but..." I hadn't hesitated. I'd wired the money the next morning. August 2018, emergency roof repair after the hailstorm, $7,500. He had sent a picture of the damaged shingles, a bucket positioned ominously in their upstairs hallway. The insurance is fighting us on this. January 2019, Lily's emergency appendectomy covered the deductible, $3,000. They'd been so young, so terrified. I'd sat in the waiting room with them for 12 hours, my presence a silent anchor in the storm of their fear. The list grew. Summer art camp for Lily 2 years running. New tires for their SUV. That pricey couples therapy retreat in Sedona they said saved their marriage. I wrote until my hand cramped, the items stacking up, 20, 30, 40. I stopped at 43, the pen trembling in my hand. I hadn't even reached the last 2 years. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that if this ever went before a judge, I would not bring this list. I would not reduce a lifetime of care to a column of figures. This wasn't a battle over money. This was a battle over my very right to exist in their narrative. I was being edited out of the story of my own family, and the lawsuit was the red pen. That afternoon, I forced myself to shower, to put on real clothes. The fabric felt strange against my skin, like wearing a costume. I needed counsel, not legal advice, not yet, but the kind of wisdom that comes from a life similarly lived. I only knew there was one person I could trust for that. Her name was Beatrice, and we had taught 8th grade English together for 25 years at Oakwood Middle School. She was 76 now, walked with a polished mahogany cane she'd named the General, and had a voice that could slice through teenage angst and administrative nonsense with equal precision. I drove to the park and called her from a payphone near the duck pond, my fingers fumbling with the cold metal. I told her everything, my voice a low, rushed monotone, the envelope, the accusations, the itemized list of my maternal failures. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the faint clink of a spoon against a teacup. Then Beatrice's voice, dry as autumn leaves, came through. Let me get this straight. Your son and his wife, the ones whose mortgage you've been quietly subsidizing, want a court order because you dropped off a loaf of banana bread without filing a formal request? A sound escaped me, something between a sob and a laugh. It's not just the banana bread, Bea. They think I'm too much. Too much what? She retorted. Too much love? Too much support? Since when did those become indictable offenses? She paused, and I could picture her sitting in her sun-dazed parlor, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Helen, listen to me. You don't want to fight them? Fine. But they declared the war. All you can do now is decide whether you're going to show up for the battle or surrender your dignity without a shot. And from where I'm sitting, you've been surrendering piece by piece for years. Her words were a splash of cold water. She was right. I didn't desire vengeance. I desired validation. I wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged not as a problem to be managed, but as a person with a history and a heart. When I returned home, the weight felt different. It was no longer the crushing burden of shock, but the manageable heaviness of a difficult task ahead. I checked my mailbox, a habit I'd neglected. Among the bills and catalogs was a small, unmarked envelope. My name was written on the front in a familiar looping, childish script. Lily. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat on the porch steps right there, the cold wood seeping through my slacks, and tore it open. Inside was a sheet of lined paper torn from a spiral notebook. Dear Nana, it began, the letters large and carefully formed. I heard Mom and Dad talking. I wasn't supposed to, but they were using loud voices. Dad said he didn't want to do this, but Mom said you didn't understand soft hints. She said you needed a hard lesson. I don't know what that means, but it sounds scary. I miss you. I think you're the only one who lets me talk about my dreams without telling me to be realistic. You always look at me like you're telling me the most important news in the world. I'm sorry. It was signed simply, Lily, with a small, lopsided heart drawn beneath her name. I pressed the paper to my chest, the ink-smudged words feeling more real, more powerful than all the legal documents in the world. The sun was dipping below the rooftops, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. For the first time in days, the crushing sense of invisibility lifted. There was still one voice, small and true, that believed I mattered. One voice, it turned out, was a foundation you could build a fight on. The phrase echoed in my mind, a ghost from a few months ago. You're here too often. The words had been dropped into the space between us not like a suggestion, but a verdict. Clara had been standing in her immaculate kitchen, arms crossed over her chest, a human barricade. David had been studying the pattern on their quartz countertop as if it held the secrets of the universe. It was a Thursday. I'd brought over a pot of chicken and rice soup. Lily had been home with a cough the week before, and in my foolish, hopeful heart, I thought the comfort of a familiar meal might be a bridge. I hadn't called. That, it seemed, was the cardinal sin. Clara hadn't even let me fully step inside. "It's not a great time," she had said, her voice flat. Then, "We've talked about this, Helen." And when I'd stood there, my smile frozen and stupid on my face, the thermal bag of soup growing heavy in my hand, she had delivered the final blow. "You're here too often." I remembered the sensation so clearly. The bite of the bag's handles into my palms, the warmth of the soup seeping through the insulated fabric, a pathetic contrast to the ice forming in my veins. David had finally looked up, but his gaze went straight through me, focusing on some point in the middle distance. He said nothing. That silence was what haunted me.
Not Clara's bluntness, not the sight of Leo peeking around the corner before being gently shooed away, not even the soft, definitive click of the door closing behind me. It was my son's silence. I'd left the soup on their welcome mat, the one that now read, "Go away, we are introverting," rung the bell, and walked back to my car. Each step felt like walking away from a lifetime of investment, hearing the structure crack and splinter behind me without a single cry of alarm. The following week, I noticed the family group chat had been renamed. It had once been the Harper Family Fun Zone. Now it was Home Base Updates. I noticed, of course. I scrolled through the stagnant messages every evening, a digital ghost haunting a space where I was no longer welcome. They hadn't removed me, but they had muted my existence. I'd tried to rationalize it. They're busy. Modern life is a whirlwind of schedules and obligations. I'm just an old-fashioned model, obsolete. I began to dissect every interaction. Was it wrong to ask if the children were getting enough sleep? Was it intrusive to notice Leo's shoes were getting tight? Was bringing homemade soup now an act of aggression? The final fracture came 2 months later. Lily had a dance recital. I found out through Beatrice, whose great niece was in the same class. She'd shown me the program. Lily Harper, 3rd from the top. I hadn't been invited. I went anyway. I slipped into the very back row of the community center auditorium, a shadow in the dark. I saw my granddaughter line up with the other little girls, her face a mixture of terror and excitement, her eyes scanning the crowd. Looking for her parents, certainly. I doubt she was looking for me. She danced to a tinny recording of a pop song, her movements hesitant, a beat behind the others. Utterly beautiful in her vulnerability. I wept silent, proud tears the entire time. The moment the music ended, I slipped out, a phantom applauding in the empty hallway. I couldn't risk being seen, being scolded for my presence. 2 days later, the email arrived from David. "Mom, one of the other parents mentioned they saw you at Lily's recital. I really wish you had checked with us first. It feels like you're not respecting the boundaries we've set. We're trying to foster self-reliance in the kids, and your unannounced attendance can undermine that. Let's connect soon, but please try to see this from our perspective." It was signed, "All the best, David." All the best. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop with a quiet, final snap. I went into my backyard and deadheaded the roses with a ferocity that left my hands scratched and bleeding. For 20 minutes, I pretended the digital ghost of my son's rejection didn't exist. I never replied. That was the week the court summons arrived. Now, sitting on my porch with Lily's note in my hand, I wondered if that pot of soup had been the final straw for Clara. If my stubborn, quiet insistence on loving them, on showing up despite all evidence that I was unwanted, had been the final push she needed to make it legal. "You're here too often." The phrase was etched into me now, a scar behind my ribs, not because of its explicit meaning, but because of the universe of meaning it contained. It didn't say, "We make you uncomfortable." It didn't say, "We are ashamed of you." It didn't say, "We have outgrown you." But it meant all of that. And worse, David had let her speak for them both. He had abdicated his voice, his history, his loyalty. That, I realized, was the true injury, the one that eclipsed the lawsuit, the silent holidays, the lost bedtime stories. It was the knowledge that my son, the boy I had rocked through night terrors, whose skinned knees I had kissed, who once presented me with a macaroni necklace as if it were the crown jewels, had allowed someone else to decide I was expendable. He had stood by, silent, and let it happen. It was on a Thursday afternoon while I was clearing out the junk drawer in the hallway that I realized the final, brutal truth. The gifts no longer counted. Buried under a tangle of old charging cords and expired coupons was a faded manila envelope. On the front, in my own blocky handwriting, was written, "For the grandkids." Inside were 2 savings bonds, a letter I'd written to Lily and Leo for when they were older, and a birthday card for David from the previous year that I'd never sent. I'd written it, sealed it, and then lost my nerve. I remembered holding it, staring at the message I'd inscribed, "You will always be my greatest adventure." It had felt weak then. It felt pathetic now. I stared at the bonds, these small, crisp pieces of paper that represented a future I might not be allowed to witness. What was the point of giving a gift to children being taught to view you as a nuisance? That's when I went to the back of my bedroom closet to the low shelf where I kept the important documents. It took me less than 20 minutes to assemble the paper trail of a mother's love that was now being presented as evidence of her crimes. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing ominously in the dim room, and began to type. Down payment, $52,000. New HVAC unit, $9,200. Lily's horseback riding lessons, $1,800. I didn't write down the countless bags of groceries, the unpaid babysitting, the birthday parties I funded from a distance. Those weren't formal. Those were love. You don't keep a tally sheet for love. But they were. Their lawsuit was the tally sheet. I felt a heat behind my eyes, a pressure building in my skull, but I did not cry. Instead, I picked up the phone, my hand remarkably steady, and I called a lawyer. The receptionist who answered sounded young, her voice a bored melody. "Law offices, how may I direct your call?" I took a breath. "I need to speak with someone regarding a family matter." I paused, the words feeling alien in my mouth. "My son is suing me." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. I had her full attention now. An appointment was secured for the following Tuesday. I hung up and stared at the list on my screen, the glowing numbers a ledger of my failure. Or was it his? Because I knew with a deep maternal instinct that transcended all this legal nonsense what truly fueled this. It wasn't about soup or unannounced visits or even Clara's rigid adherence to some parenting philosophy she'd read in a blog. It was about shame. Somewhere along the way, my son had decided that I was an embarrassment, that my life as a public school teacher, a widow, a woman of simple, steadfast ways, didn't fit the sleek, curated narrative of the life he was building, a life of artisanal cocktails and silent retreats and impeccably managed perceptions. I was a piece of shabby chic furniture in a world of stark minimalism, and I clashed. He couldn't bring himself to say it, so they had found another way to remove me. Label me intrusive, brand me as a problem, sue me. That night, I called no one, not even Beatrice. I sat in my living room as the dusk deepened into night.
A cup of untouched peppermint tea going cold on the side table. My spider plants were wilting, my back ached from the tension, and still I sat. At one point, I picked up the unsent birthday card. You will always be my greatest adventure. I tore it in half, then into quarters, letting the pieces fall into the wastebasket. I didn't cry. Some gifts, I thought, simply don't count. Not when the recipients have stopped recognizing them as gifts at all.
The next morning, I put on my sturdiest walking shoes. I went to the post office and mailed the savings bonds to Lily and Leo in 2 separate plain envelopes. No return address, no explanatory note. Let them, one day in a future I might not share, decide for themselves what they represented. I was keeping nothing. He raised his voice. Not to a shout, not quite, but it was sharp, edged with a frustration he clearly felt was my fault. We were standing in my driveway 3 days after I'd first spoken to the lawyer, and David had come over, unannounced, to talk. He didn't hug me, he didn't step inside, he just stood by his expensive, silent electric car, arms crossed, a deep furrow between his brows. "I just think," he said, his tone that of a man explaining a simple concept to a very slow child, "you're making this into something it doesn't have to be." I stayed quiet. I had learned that when someone is committed to rewriting history, silence is a more powerful weapon than any argument. "I mean, we were just hoping for some breathing room, some clarity. We never wanted it to go this far, but you've made it difficult." That word again, difficult. "Your lawyer sent us a document, a formal response to the complaint." "Yes," I said, my voice calm. "I did. I didn't expect that from you, Mom." A bitter laugh almost escaped me. What had he expected? That I would simply fold? That I would accept my erasure with a quiet thank you? Instead, I looked him directly in the eye. "What did you expect, David?" He flinched, just slightly. "I thought maybe we could settle this like adults, without dragging it through the mud." "Settle what?" I asked, my voice still dangerously even. He opened his mouth, then closed it, frustration flashing across his face. "You've been interfering, Mom. You show up uninvited, you give the kids things we haven't approved, you question our decisions." "You mean I loved you?" I said. He exhaled, a long, weary sigh, as if the burden of my affection was exhausting him. "It's not about love. It's about boundaries." There it was, the magic word, the shield, the sword, the ultimate verdict. "So you filed a lawsuit because I brought soup?" "It's not personal," he insisted, and this time the laugh did escape me, low, dry, and utterly devoid of humor. "Not personal? You are taking your mother to court. Explain to me how that is not personal." He didn't answer. I took a slow step forward. "Tell me, David, when I stayed up all night quizzing you for your biology final, was that personal? When I used my retirement fund to help you through grad school, was that personal? When I walked a feverish Leo around this very block for 2 hours so Clara could sleep? When I sat in the back of that auditorium and watched Lily dance her heart out, was any of that not personal?" His jaw tightened. "We just need space." "You want space?" I said, finally letting the emotion I'd been bottling up infuse my words. "Then say it. Don't hide behind court orders and coldly worded emails. Say what you mean. You're done with me? You embarrass me? You want me erased from your perfect, polished life?" "That's not true," he snapped, his voice rising.
But you keep inserting yourself where you're not needed. There. Finally. The unvarnished truth. Not loved, not needed. That's what it all came down to. I took a step back, feeling something profound and permanent settle inside me. Not shatter, settle. Like a heavy door closing gently on a room I would never enter again. Finally, I whispered. Then louder, my voice clear and firm. You're not getting a cent back from me, David. Everything I gave freely because I believed I was part of this family. I was wrong. That doesn't make it a debt. I didn't want it to be like this, he muttered, looking at the ground. Then you shouldn't have let her speak for both of you. He flinched, a real physical reaction this time. Andrea wasn't here, of course. She never did the dirty work herself. She delegated, even the dismantling of a family. I'm not your problem anymore. I won't be leaving muffins on your porch. I won't be showing up with soup. I won't be at Lily's next recital. That's what you wanted, isn't it? I didn't want this, he repeated, a helpless gesture encompassing the space between us. You did, I said softly. Maybe not out loud, but you did. He looked at his shoes, then back at me, a flicker of the boy I knew buried deep beneath the weary, frustrated man. So you're really going to fight this? In court? No, I said, turning toward my front door. I'm not fighting. I'm just going to be heard. He opened his mouth to say something more, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked back into my house and closed the door, leaving him standing alone in the driveway with all the space he would ever need. Inside, I leaned against the closed door, my heart pounding, not with panic, but with a strange, fierce rhythm. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just breathed, in and out, in and out. Because I had finally understood when someone recasts your love as a disruption, the hardest and most dignified thing you can do is to walk away without ever begging them to let you stay. The lawyer's office was a study in muted tones. The walls were a pale, non-committal gray, the carpet a practical charcoal, and the only decoration was a single, abstract print of swirling beige and cream that looked like a visual representation of silence. The air hummed with the discreet sound of central air conditioning, a sterile white noise that felt designed to swallow emotion. It was quieter than a library, more solemn than a church. I sat on a firm leather chair, my hands folded in my lap, feeling both incredibly small and monumentally present. Miss Adele Vance emerged from her inner office. She was a woman in her late 40s with a sharp, intelligent face and dark hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Her handshake was firm and brief, her eyes appraising but not unkind. She didn't speak to me like I was a fragile antique, and for that, I was immediately grateful. "Let's go over what we're looking at, Helen," she said once we were seated across her broad, uncluttered desk. She opened a slim folder. "I've reviewed their petition. It's carefully constructed, I'll give them that. The language is designed to frame a family conflict as a matter of civil harassment. The primary goals are a legally enforceable no-contact order, specifically prohibiting you from approaching their home, the children's school, or their places of work, and restitution for what they term unsolicited financial contributions, which they claim have created a dynamic of unhealthy obligation." She paused, her gaze steady on me. "This is difficult to hear. Are you okay to continue?" I nodded, my throat tight. In this sterile room, the accusations felt even more absurd, more brutal. "I'm fine." She continued. "They're building their case on a foundation of repeated boundary violations. The term emotional coercion appears several times.
They're attempting to paint a picture of a relationship that is not just strained, but actively harmful. I couldn't help the dry, mirthless sound that escaped me. Is that what we're calling being a grandmother now? Emotional coercion? Miss Vance offered a small, genuine smile. Not in any court I practice in. Your response, if we proceed formally, will allow us to present our own documentation, a timeline of your involvement, financial records that show a pattern of gifting, not lending, character references. But you need to be prepared. In that courtroom, they will present a version of you that is meddlesome, overbearing, and invasive. They will try to make mother sound like a synonym for stalker. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking softly. They've already done that in real life, Miss Vance. The courtroom will just be a formality. She nodded, then steepled her fingers. Now I need to ask you something challenging. If this proceeds, it will become a matter of public record. Not front-page news, but accessible. Among your family, your friends, your community, are you prepared to be seen as the mother who fought her son in court? People will take sides. Some will whisper. Some will be openly hostile. You could lose more than just proximity to your grandchildren. You could lose social standing, friendships. I looked at her directly, the steadiness in my own voice surprising me. No one is calling it a fight because I didn't start this. They did. And as for what I could lose, I unfolded my hands, looking at the veins mapping their way across my skin. I've already lost the things that mattered. My son's respect, my place in my grandchildren's daily lives, the quiet certainty that I was loved. What's left to lose? The opinion of people who would judge me for defending my own name? Miss Vance gave a slow, approving nod. Good. That's the clarity we need. We spent the next hour discussing strategy. I would not countersue. I would not seek damages. My goal was not to punish, but to refute, to defend my name, my intentions, and the integrity of a lifetime of love. You're not the first client I've had in this position, Helen, she said as she walked me to the door. It's more common than people think. Grown children, building their own lives, sometimes forget who laid the foundation. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth of her words settled in the quiet space between us. When I left her office, the outside world felt jarringly vibrant. The sun was warm on my face, the sounds of traffic and snippets of conversation a chaotic symphony after the tomb-like silence of her office. I found a small cafe a few blocks away, the kind with mismatched chairs and the rich, bitter scent of freshly ground coffee. I took a corner table with a cinnamon scone and a cup of Earl Grey, and just watched. Across from me, a young mother was trying to manage a toddler and an infant. She was cutting a pancake into tiny, manageable pieces, wiping a sticky chin, her movements a tired, graceful ballet of love and exhaustion. The toddler whined, throwing a piece of fruit on the floor. The mother didn't scold, she just sighed, a small, patient smile touching her lips as she bent to retrieve it. I wondered with a pang that was both sharp and distant if she would be thanked for these moments, or if one day her presence would be summarized in a legal document as disruptive. The next morning, I went through my files again, but not for bank statements. I was searching for a different kind of evidence. I found an old stationery box in the back of my closet. Inside were letters, cards, drawings. A birthday card from David when he was 10, to the best mom in the world. A crayon drawing of Lily, of the two of us holding hands under a giant smiling sun. And most painfully, a note from Clara, from a time that felt like another lifetime. It was on heavy, scented paper, her handwriting a flowing cursive. Helen, thank you for everything. I don't know how we'd manage this newborn phase without your calm and your casseroles. Love, Clara. Love, Clara. I set them aside, my hands trembling. Then, one by one, I placed them back in the box and closed the lid, not to use as ammunition, but to remember that I hadn't always been a defendant. I had once been a sanctuary. Later that day, Beatrice called. "Well," she barked down the line, "you sound composed. I was expecting fire and brimstone." "I don't need fire, Bea," I said, looking out at my garden. "I have paper and truth." She chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Good, because I have a feeling they're going to underestimate you, and you'll need to be 10 times stronger in that courtroom than you've ever been in your life." I didn't tell her, but I already knew. I had raised the child alone after Arthur died. I had navigated grief that felt like a physical amputation. I had built a life of meaning from scratch. A courtroom, with its rules and its rituals, didn't frighten me. The thought of being silently, politely erased from the story of my own flesh and blood, that was the true terror. But I was no longer willing to disappear quietly. The envelope was small, the paper inside familiar, lined, torn from a spiral notebook, tucked between a pizza flyer and a cable bell. I almost missed it. Then I saw the handwriting. Lily's. My breath hitched. I sat on the top step of my porch, the wood still cool from the night, and opened it with clumsy fingers. It wasn't a long letter. It was a burst of feeling, honest and unpolished. I heard Mom and Dad talking. I wasn't supposed to, but the door wasn't all the way closed. Dad said he felt bad, but Mom said you didn't listen to nice. She said you needed a consequence. I don't know what that is, but it sounds bad. I don't like it. I miss you. I think you're the only one who doesn't tell me my stories are silly. You always listen to the whole thing. You don't look at your phone. I'm sorry, Nana. It was signed with her name and a heart that was more of a lopsided circle. I sat there as the afternoon light softened, the shadows of the oak tree in my yard stretching long, dark fingers across the grass. The world was quiet. Somewhere, a lawnmower started up, then sputtered out. I read the note again and again. She had heard. She had seen. Children are porous. They absorb the unspoken tensions, the whispered arguments, the cold silences. We adults, in our arrogance, think our conflicts are contained behind closed doors. But the children, they feel the chill. They carry the weight of our unresolved anger in their small bodies. And Lily, my bright, sensitive girl, was carrying all of it. That night, I wrote her back. I used the same kind of paper, lined and simple. I didn't send it through her parents. I didn't trust their internal handling. I wrote from my heart. My dearest Lily, never ever think you have to be sorry. You have done nothing wrong. I miss you more than I can possibly put into words. Sometimes grown-ups get very lost in their own worries and forget how to speak with kindness. They build walls when they should be building bridges. But you, my darling,
You have always known how to keep your heart open. That is a rare and beautiful gift, and I am so incredibly proud of the person you are becoming. No matter what happens, I want you to know that my love for you is a constant. It does not change. It cannot be canceled or sent away. And no matter what anyone says, you can always write to me. Always. With all my love, Nana. I folded the letter, sealed it in a plain envelope with only her name on it, and walked it to the post office the next morning as the sun was rising. Let Clara find it. Let her read it. Let her see the truth reflected in her daughter's eyes and in my unwavering words. I was done with hiding in the shadows of their disapproval. The day after that, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but a gut instinct told me to answer. Nana? The voice was a whisper, so faint I had to press the phone hard against my ear. Lily? Sweetheart, is that you? I used Mom's old phone. She's in the garden. Her words were rushed, breathless.
I had to. I wanted to say thank you for the letter. I hid it under my mattress. My heart thud a painful, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. Lily, you shouldn't be. You could get in trouble. I had to, she repeated, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. Then a silence, filled only by the sound of her breathing. Nana, she whispered, are you mad at Daddy? I closed my eyes, leaning against the kitchen counter for support. No, Lily. I'm not mad. I'm hurt. There's a difference. Being mad is like a fire. Being hurt is like a deep ache. It takes longer to heal. Another silence, then a small sniffle. Will you still come to my dance showcase? It's in 2 weeks. I took a sharp breath. The pain of the question, a physical stab. Oh, baby, I don't know if I can. That might complicate things for your parents right now. She didn't ask why. She didn't need the specifics. Children understand brokenness on an instinctual level. They don't require the blueprint of the fracture. I want you to, she said, her voice small and thick with unshed tears. I know, my love, and I want to be there, more than anything. I love you, Nana. I love you too, Lily, more than the moon and the stars. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen for a long time, the silent phone still clutched in my hand. The kettle began its shrill whistle, a sound of normalcy in the profound abnormality of my life. I didn't move to shut it off. I just let the sound scream, filling the empty space, a perfect soundtrack to the turmoil inside me. Later, Beatrice called again. You still breathing over there? I told her about the note, the phone call. Well, she said, her voice softening, you've got one ally in that house. One is enough. It is, I said, and I meant it, because sometimes when the world seems determined to silence you, all it takes is one small, honest, brave voice to remind you that you are still worth hearing. The courthouse was a monument to imposing gray stone, its steps worn smooth by generations of anxious feet. The air inside was cool and smelled of lemon-scented polish and old paper. It was colder than I had anticipated, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Everything gleamed with a hard, unforgiving light. The polished marble floors, the brass fixtures, and the glass partitions that reflected back a version of myself I barely recognized. A 71-year-old woman in a navy blue dress, her silver hair neatly styled, and her posture rigid with a resolve she had to consciously maintain. I had chosen my outfit with care. Simple, dignified, unassailable. I even wore the pearl necklace Arthur had given me on our 25th anniversary. It felt like a talisman, a touchstone to a time when love was simple and unwavering. Miss Vance met me just inside the massive wooden doors, a leather portfolio under her arm. You look steady, she said. I feel steady. And this time, it wasn't a lie. We walked into the courtroom together. It was smaller than I had imagined from television, more intimate, which made it feel somehow more exposing. Dark wood benches, a raised dais for the judge, 2 simple tables for the opposing sides. David and Clara were already there, seated at the table on the right. Clara was dressed in a tailored cream-colored suit, her posture impeccable, her face a smooth, unreadable mask. David looked like he hadn't slept. He was staring at a point on the blank wall in front of him, his shoulders slumped. He did not look at me as I entered. I took my seat beside Miss Vance. We didn't speak. The bailiff called the room to order and the judge entered. A woman in her 60s with short, silvering hair and eyes that missed nothing. She moved with an efficient grace, her black robes whispering against the floor. She stated the case number and the nature of the petition in a clear, neutral tone, devoid of any drama. David's lawyer stood first. He was a man with a soothing, almost monotonous voice, the kind used to sand down sharp edges. He described a pattern of behavior that infringed upon the plaintiff's right to domestic peace. He used words like uninvited, uncontrolled, and interfering. He spoke of the soup, the recital, the unsanctioned coat, weaving them together into a tapestry of oppression. He never once used the word grandmother. He made me sound like a force of nature that had to be legally restrained. David sat beside him, a statue of misery. He still did not look at me. Then it was our turn. Miss Vance stood, her posture calm and confident. "Your Honor," she began, her voice resonating clearly in the quiet room, "we are not here to contest the right of Mr. and Mrs. Harper to live their lives as they see fit. We respect personal autonomy. We acknowledge the challenges of modern parenting. However, we believe this court deserves to hear the full context of this relationship, not as a list of perceived inconveniences, but as a lifetime of devotion and mutual support." She handed a bound document to the judge. "This is a timeline of Mrs. Harper's involvement in her son's life, supported by financial records and personal correspondence. It reflects not a pattern of intrusion, but a history of gifts given freely out of love." Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Harper, the court has heard from your son. Would you like to speak for yourself?" The judge nodded. "Briefly, Mrs. Harper." I stood. My knees protested, a dull ache, but I ignored it. I smoothed my dress and walked the few steps to the small podium. I looked first at the judge. Then, for the first time that day, I let my gaze settle fully on my son. He finally met my eyes, and in his I saw it. Not anger, not defiance, but a flicker of profound, gut-wrenching shame. I took a slow breath. "Your Honor," I began, my voice quieter than Miss Vance's, but clear and steady. "I raised my son by myself after his father passed. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. I sewed his Halloween costumes. I packed his lunches. I sat in the audience for every school play, every band concert, every award ceremony, and I cheered for him even when he just walked across the stage. I gave him everything I had. My time, my energy, my love, my savings, not because I expected a return, but because that is what a parent does. I do not deny that I have been present in my son's life, but presence is not a crime. Showing up is not harassment. Loving your family too much is not the legal equivalent of trying to control them." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. "My son and his wife have every right to raise their family as they see fit. That is their privilege. But to legally recast a mother's love as a threat, to seek to banish me as if I were a dangerous stranger, that isn't about boundaries, Your Honor. That is about erasure." I sat down. The room was utterly silent. The judge looked from me to David. "Mr. Harper," she said, her tone even, "would you like to respond?" David shifted in his seat. Clara placed a hand on his arm, a subtle pressure. He looked down at the table, then back at the judge. "No, Your Honor," he said, his voice hoarse. "We've said what we came to say." The judge nodded, made a note on her pad, and stated that she would review the documents and deliver her written decision within 10 days. The bailiff dismissed the court. I stood. Miss Vance placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did well, Helen," she said softly. "You were magnificent." David and Clara gathered their things and left quickly,
Without a backward glance, but not before I saw it again, that flicker in his eyes as he passed me. He hadn't expected me to speak. He hadn't expected me to have a voice at all. But I had. And for the first time in a very long time, in a room full of strangers,
He had been forced to listen. The judge's decision arrived on a Tuesday, enclosed in the same kind of cream-colored formal envelope. I opened it at my kitchen table, the morning sun casting a warm parallelogram of light across the wood. The language was dry and precise. The petition for a no-contact order was denied. The court finds insufficient evidence to meet the legal threshold for harassment or intentional infliction of emotional distress. It went on to recommend the family seek mediation, noting that the complexities of familial relationships are often ill-suited to the blunt instrument of litigation. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't vindication. It was a dismissal, a legal way of saying their case had no merit. Miss Vance called it a total victory. To me, it felt like being declared not guilty of a crime I could never have committed. The silence from their house deepened in the days that followed. I hadn't expected a parade, but some small acknowledgement of the judge's ruling, a shamefaced phone call, a terse note, would have felt human. Nothing came. The cream-colored envelope would have arrived at their door too. I knew because I saw the mail truck stop, saw Clara retrieve the stack, her body language unchanged. She never glanced toward my house. I started walking every morning, a new ritual along a path that wove behind the townhouses. It was there, surrounded by stubborn dandelions pushing through cracks in the pavement, that I began to rebuild the quiet parts of myself. One morning, a week after the ruling, I found Lily waiting by the community mailbox, scuffing her shoe against the curb. "Hi, Nana," she said, her voice tentative. "Hi, sweetheart," my heart squeezed. "I'm not supposed to be talking to you. I know." She handed me a book. "A Wrinkle in Time. You gave this to me. I thought you might want it back." Her eyes were wide with unspoken questions. I took it. "Thank you, Lily." I crouched down, my old me's protesting. "Listen to me. You don't have to carry any of this, okay? This is grown-up business, and I am okay. I really am." "Will you see me again?" she asked, her lower lip trembling just slightly. "I don't know. But you hold on to this." I tapped my chest over my heart. "You're right in here. Always." She hugged me then, a quick, fierce squeeze, and ran off. I clutched the book and watched her go, the weight of it a tangible connection. That evening, I wrote her one last letter and tucked it inside the front cover. "My brave girl," it read. "Keep asking big questions. And remember, the most powerful love is often the quietest kind. It lives in old stories and in hearts that never forget. Yours, always, Nana." I left it on her porch before dawn. The house felt different, lighter. I had stopped waiting for an echo from a mountain that would not answer. I joined a gardening club, accepting a cutting from a friendly woman named Muriel. I had coffee with Beatrice, where we talked about books and politics and everything but our estranged children. I was learning, slowly, to stop reaching where I was not wanted, and to stop apologizing for the depth of my reach. Then, in the gentle decay of autumn, a letter came. The handwriting was his. "Mom," it began, "I don't know how to write this. I've started a dozen times. Lily showed me the necklace you left with the book. She said it was from someone who believes in quiet magic. She misses you. I think I miss you too. Or I miss what we had. I didn't expect any of this to go so far. I didn't expect it to hurt like this. Andrea thought we were protecting the kids. I think maybe we were just protecting ourselves from having to face things.
You didn't deserve what we did. I know that now." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply bore witness to the truth. And in 3 pages of messy, heartfelt script, he gave me back the son I thought I'd lost. He remembered the bike, the science terms, the silent vigil in the hospital. He remembered. I didn't reply for 2 days. I let the words settle. Then I wrote back, plain and simple. "Thomas, thank you for your letter. I heard you. That is enough for now. Tell Lillian the magic is still there." A week later, a note from Andrea arrived. It was careful, not warm, but not sharp. "Helen, I know we have caused you pain. I don't know if I can ever be the daughter-in-law you hoped for, but I see how much you love our children, and I see how much they love you. Perhaps we can talk. Not to fix everything, just to start again, with less noise." We met at the park, on a bench under a sycamore tree shedding its bark. She was nervous, her hands twisting in her lap. "I was scared," she admitted, not looking at me. "Scared of being compared, of never being enough. You always knew what to do, and I didn't. I thought if I created more space, they'd see me." "Did it work?" I asked gently. She shook her head, a sad, small smile on her face. "No, they just missed you more." We sat in a silence that was no longer hostile, but contemplative. 2 women who had loved the same children in different, clashing ways. "I don't know what the future looks like," she said finally, "but the children want you in their lives. It's time we respected that." Lily's winter choir concert was the following Saturday. I sat in the 3rd row. She spotted me immediately, and her whole face lit up in a radiant, unguarded smile. She sang her heart out. Afterward, she barreled into me for a hug that felt like coming home. Ben followed, shy but willing. Andrea stood nearby, watching, not intervening. And Thomas, he walked up, his hands in his pockets, his eyes full of a sorrow and hope so profound it stole my breath. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice thick. I reached out and placed my hand on his cheek, a gesture from his childhood. "I know." We didn't talk about the lawsuit, the letters, the silence. Some wounds are too deep for words. They can only be healed by new actions, slowly, over time. I had survived not by fighting fire with fire, but by becoming water, persistent, patient, and ultimately, indispensable. I had learned that when someone tries to silence your love, the most powerful rebuttal is to love anyway, quietly, steadfastly, until the noise they make simply fades away. The story doesn't end with a perfect reconciliation. Some cracks remain, hairline fractures that will always be part of the pottery. But the vase holds water again. It is useful. It is loved. And for a woman of 71 years old, that is more than enough. It is everything.